Okay, hey everyone. Wanted to welcome you to the October edition of the Agile at Scale SIG. It's been a few months since we've hosted. Leland and I have been pretty busy beavers, but we are really excited for today's program with Jason, and which we'll get to in a moment. But first, for those that have not interacted with or been to an Agile Austin event before, we are a 501(c)(6) nonprofit. And we look to connect people and foster professional growth, not just through Austin, but now through the entire world through events like this. Our board for this year, Sid Markle, our president, Lonnie Dame, I'm the CTO, Alex Hawks, Jenny Halcomb, really great group of people that are really keeping keeping the wheels turning on this organization, which is I think pretty close to 20 years old now. So good stuff. And of course, we have sponsors that make all this possible. Agile Velocity, a longtime supporter of Agile Austin. They have been great to us and really appreciate them. Resumex, as well as Ad Meliora Coaching. So thank you to all of them for their sponsorship and one of the reasons we can make today's program free. If you are uh, in the market for a public workshop, Agile Velocity offers many of those. You can check out their website, agilevelocity.com, and you can use code AgileAustin to get a 15% discount off of any of those trainings. And if you want to become a sponsor like those folks and get advertisements like this, feel free to contact us, contact at agileaustin.org. And also, we are sustained by our members. Membership is only $35, hasn't increased in good 16, 17 years. So feel offers a lot of benefits to you all so that, these events can be free. We have currently approximately 5 SIGs and that meet at varying cadences and a book club as well. And so this product and AI SIG, I think will be the next one coming up maybe next Friday. So you can go to meetup.com/Agile Austin to see more of what's in the works. And so, just briefly, Leland started this in 2016, so coming up on 10 years. And then I joined as co-lead in 2020. And yeah, we just love to learn and grow. We don't actually have any topics on the radar for the next couple months or speakers. So if you are interested in speaking, hit us up. Got contact information at the end of this presentation. Um, but Jason is going to be talking. Oh, sorry, I think I got the title wrong on that. But Jason's going to be talking to us today. That was our last talk. I didn't get a chance to update that, but really looking forward to his presentation today. If you want to get in touch with Leland or myself, leland.newsome@agileaustin.org or ben.rogers@agileaustin.org. And then one final thing, I dropped a link in the chat to Keep Austin Agile 2026, our annual conference coming up next year. And so you can check out the broad strokes of what the conference is going to look like and the theme and kind of the cute thing that our graphic artist did to the armadillo. And so, yeah, we will have a call for speaker submissions soon. So keep an eye out for communication on that. So, with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I am going to pass it over to Jason. So, Jason, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So, yeah, I started as a developer, got into agile coaching and consulting in the early 2000s. Started working on my first enterprise transformations around the mid 2000s, and then realized that all of that agile stuff really didn't have a whole lot to do with agile and more to do with change. Just I think every agile coach kind of hits a point where they're like, this stuff really isn't all that hard. Why doesn't anybody get it, and why don't they want to do it? And then I started knocking on the door of the organizational development world. So that's really been the last I guess, almost 20 years of my work has been how do we steal all the good ideas from lean startup and agile and organizational change, and how do we take that stuff and how do we build a more contextualized approach for change instead of following what is kind of called in the traditional change management world checkbox change management. So we go through the steps, we go through the phases, status reports are all green, nothing is different. And what I wanted to go through today was I've seen a shift over the last, I guess, few years where more and more traditional change managers, to characterize it that way, that are not coming from an agile background, or they're coming from a big business agile background, meaning, people who've been involved in agile since the early 2000s are kind of coming from in my opinion, coming from the values principles side of it. Whereas there was kind of a point in time where agile started to become more about process than anything else. So they're kind of realizing that this old way of doing change, of creating these giant documents, taking 6 months to plan something out, trying to unleash it on the organization, hitting a wall of resistance, blaming that resistance, creating more plans, creating more documents, that kind of stuff is number one, that luxury of time is gone, especially in today's world. Leaders want everything faster, better, cheaper, and they're finding that they're looking for ideas that are going to help them get unstuck in the current situation that they're in. So I wanted to chat a little bit about the six big ideas of adaptive organizations, which was the name of one of the books that Ken Rickard and I released, I think, last year. And this year we released the follow-up, Beyond Change Theater, which goes a little bit deeper into the ideas. And the premise is you have to bear with me as I draw on this, because I usually have my pencil and iPad, but my daughter's taking it for school. So I'm gonna have to fight through trying to draw this in Miro. And I do have the chat up. So if anything, if any questions pop up, toss them in the chat. I'll kind of keep an eye on the little notifier up there. So there's kind of this premise that we're starting from, that's supposed to be an arrow. We've got our current state, and before we do anything in the traditional change world, we want to capture this current state, sort of like almost like a frozen moment in time. That's how they think of it. And then we want to paint a picture of what we want our future state to be. And then we manage towards it. Kind of as simple as that. But it's kind of it's linear by nature, because obviously time is linear. So we have to get all this stuff right. We have to get everything about our current state right. That includes all the analysis, all the change readiness, all the activities that we do to start up a project, stakeholder interviews, create all the documents, create the plan, all that kind of stuff. Paint a picture and kind of guess what our ROI is going to be, and then try to manage towards it. And it sounds logical and it sounds reasonable, but I think we all know as soon as you start to implement any change in your organization, you're already off the rails, because as soon as whatever the change is comes in contact with the people in the organization, you quickly find out that maybe it's not the right change, maybe it's not the right time, maybe there's something else going on. And the whole premise behind lean change is never assume that the change that has been dropped through the hole in the floor in the organization is the one that it actually needs. Whereas in traditional circles, it's, come hell or high water, we're going to push this thing through. So one of the things I always like to ask is, in traditional circles is, we do change readiness assessments. Maybe that's surveys, interviews, gathering insights from retrospective data, whatever it is. What happens if we find out people aren't ready? And what do you think the answer is? So you do
You-
a readiness assessment and people aren't ready. What do you do?
You're going to get resistance.
Yep. And usually they say, well, we do it anyway, because it's been dropped through the hole in the floor. We've got the budget. We've already done the planning. We've already done the schedule. The leaders already want this thing to go through. And even if it's not the right change or not the right time or nobody gets it, we're going to execute it anyway, because of all the project management stuff that gets in the way. we've got a budget, we've got a schedule, it's on the PMO's, list of projects, so we have to do it. We can't question that type of thing. And the idea with these ideas that I want to talk about is we always have that arc of the story. We can call this the kind of the big or the strategy level. So we kind of have an idea of what we want this future to look like, but we're not worried about trying to define all of it up front. It's more or less the guardrails that are in place. So as we're kind of continually making sense and iteratively working our way through the change, we're always kind of measuring it against this big view to say, when we started this thing out, we wanted to go north. Are we still going north? We're not worried if it's a little bit northeast or a little bit northwest. We're at least headed that way, which is a good thing. So we just want to use it as kind of a gut check. And, call these milestones if you want. These might be monthly cycles. These might be 2 weeks. These might be a quarter. Doesn't really matter what they are. But this is the next view. And we might have a better idea of what is coming up closer. Maybe what goal we want to accomplish, whether it's a systems implementation, an AI transformation, digital transformation, Agile, whatever it is. But really, we want to focus on the now view. And the now view is, we have the context, we have this big strategy level. We don't have to worry too much. We just have to worry about, at the end of this week, what is the biggest problem that's in front of us right now? What can we do to take one small step forward? And then we repeat. I mean, this is going to be review for anybody who's been in the Agile space for a while. This is just iterative delivery. The one challenge with using Agile and change, as some traditionalists call it, so they kind of see Agile as a way to do change at people faster, is how the traditional world is kind of latched onto it. But it's at any point, as we're kind of measuring against this big strategy view, our now view might change a little bit. It's not going to completely throw the strategy away, but the faster we are executing these iterative cycles through change, the faster we're going to learn. Because often with all the changes that I've worked on, whether it's a reorg, whether it's a Agile, digital, or AI transformation, or a project-based rollout of a new tool, or migrating data centers, whatever the change is, early on, a friend of mine likes to say, should always start these projects red, because when you start these big things, you have a pocket full of money and an empty brain. So your first few iterations, the intention is probably going to be to learn. Whereas we've been kind of taught in the traditional change circles is to define all that up front, create all your tasks, and then everything you do is supposed to result in some type of outcome. But in the real world, it kind of doesn't work that way. We just might need to learn, hey, is this the right change at the right time? What's really going on underneath? And these 6 big ideas and the sense-making ideas that I wanted to go through give change agents a way to not lose sight of this big picture, not lose sight maybe of the next monthly milestone, if you want to call it that. But we really only want to worry about what's in front of us, because it's pretty easy to get overwhelmed. I actually just had a book club meeting this morning, and relatively small organization, I guess. They're about 1,300 people working on an Agile transformation. They've been at it for about a year, and nothing has really happened yet, because it's this big view here, this green line, it's too big, it's too uncertain. There isn't enough specifics around what it means for everybody across the organization. So they've just been kind of trying little things here and there, and maybe creating some processes and doing a couple of meetings. And it's just very loose and kind of unstructured and confusing for people. So we talked about, well, what's the most important thing to solve now? And the most important thing to solve now for this person was, we can't seem to get engagement from the leaders. Now, I'm assuming that's something common that everyone has seen. in one way or another. You know, whether you're an agile coach or change person or a manager, and some change comes through the hole in the floor, and it's seen as your responsibility and you are accountable for it. The view I have is we're facilitators of that. We don't own the change. We don't own the outcome of the change. We facilitate. So we help people unravel the hairball that is their current problem and help them figure out what they can do. And that brings all different levels of uncertainty. So, boop, boop, boop. So the 6 big ideas, I've pared it down to a few. I'm going to put a link in the chat that has a list of all of these. And when you look at that whole list, it's kind of overwhelming to start with because it's, you know, where do I start? There's a whole bunch of ideas for sense making. There's a whole bunch of tools and techniques and things I can do. How do I know what's the right thing to pick? How do I get started? So these core 6 ideas are kind of about the starting point, right? So we start from a conversation. So I can make up a fake scenario, but if somebody's got kind of a change challenge, they want to unmute and give us, I don't know, a 60-second or 2-minute playback about what that current problem is, we'll test these on a real scenario. Otherwise, I'll just use a fake demo one. So you can toss it in the chat or just unmute and say, you know, here's a current context and a current challenge that I'm struggling with. Anybody, any takers? Or even just make one up. Anybody have some Jeopardy music? I'm good with silence to let people think for a bit. No takers? All right. We'll use the idea from the meetup this morning that we did. So the problem was, like I mentioned, that just engagement was low with the CIO. So the CIO is kind of very scattered in their thinking. They'll send an email out and say, oh, I found this Agile training online through this provider and everybody should take that. And they send it. And then they'll create some diagrams and some documents about what a new ways of working process framework can look like and kind of send that out to people. So it's almost like they're just throwing a bunch of spaghetti on the wall and people are getting confused because there might be conflicting messages. They're delegating that stuff to the change person or other people in the organization, not taking in feedback from the people on the teams and just generally not being involved. And, you know, we often equate that with bad leadership, but that's just their style, right? They're probably just an idea person. They're like, here's something we could try. So we chatted about these 6 things. And when we go through these, you know, the 4 dimensions of change, there's kind of this saying in the traditional change world that change management isn't about tools, which is hilarious because the number one viewed things across all of my platforms is tools. And when people come into workshops or they come to events and stuff like that, they're like, give me a new hammer I can whack people over the head with to wrestle them into submission because they're resisting change. So the 4 dimensions of change talks about how there's these 4 interconnected things. And we talk about the balancing the art and the science of change. We desperately want the change process to be a repeatable scientific process, but it's not because humans don't work that way. There's a lot of art. There's a lot of me as the change person, you know, unmute and say a comment or drop something in the chat if this makes any sense to you. Do you reach a point in any change that you're working on where you just feel the window of opportunity is opened and people are now ready? You can't describe it, you can't characterize it, but just based on your interactions with the people in the system, you just feel, you know what, a window just opened and I think we're ready to take the next step for this change. It's like your intuition and your gut. Has anybody felt that before? Okay, so a thumbs up. Yeah, it's one of those things that's art. That brings experience. That's not something an AI chatbot can do. It's intuition based. So when we marry the art and the science, on the left-hand side, we've got self, and self is who we are as a human, right? We all bring our baggage to work, no matter what. So our temperament, our personality, our experiences, where and how we grew up, all influences how we facilitate change. And the stance that we take also depends on those things. So those things matter more than the tool. So for example, people see change canvases and they go, oh, it's a template. So I'm going to go into my meeting and I'm going to ask the leaders to fill out this template because that's their self and their stance. They see an artifact and all of their baggage and who they are as a person influences how they use that tool. Has anybody tell me who knows what an open space is? Does anybody know what an open space is or have used it before?
Only in relation to a conference.
Okay. So tell me if this sounds like an open space. So I was at what I would characterize as a traditional change conference, and the host goes up and says, "This year we're going to start with." Well, they had invited me to talk about agile change. This was quite a while ago. This is way before COVID. And they said, we're going to do this innovative open space to kick off the conference. So there's going to be 4 areas in the building for the sessions. Area number 1, you will talk about this topic. Area number 2, you're going to talk about this, 3, 4, this, that, and the other. Here's the moderator for each 4 of those sections. And the facility was set up so the moderator was in the middle, and then everybody else was an umbrella around the moderator. So yeah, thanks, Vicky. No, that's not an open space. And Ned, of course not. It's not. And you think, how could they be so stupid? You can Google how to run one, but it's fun to laugh at them. But that's what the 4 dimensions are. It's their self and their stance is getting in the way of they're using a tool not the way it was intended, but based on their fear that if they do something so different from previous conferences, nobody has topics and it's a bad experience, their board is going to yell at them. So there's other things at play other than look at these dummies who didn't use the open space right. Which was hilarious because when I went on stage, I told this same story back. I'm like, that wasn't even close to what an open space was. Here's what it really is. And you've brought me here to talk about, how to use Agile in a change context. So if this was an Agile conference, there'd be a stack of papers in the middle, bunch of markers, and some tape. And the moderator would say this. You would go, and it would be the best conference of your life. Now, if you can't let go of that uncertainty and fear that nobody's going to talk about anything, you're never going to understand what Agile is and how to use it in a change context. So the big ideas, the tools, the practices, how we view the world and the lenses we look through, all of that stuff matters. And sitting on top of that is the context. I tried to run a Lego serious play session with a bunch of C-levels in a bank once, and as soon as I put the stuff on the table, I was sworn at. I wish that wasn't the case, but they're like, get that effing, what, we're not kids, blah, blah, blah. I was like, wow, you guys are fun at parties. Let's try something different then. So all of those things kind of determine how you interact with the system. And the 5 levers describes the system. So it's the levers that we can pull when change gets invoked in an organization. And, we often default to the processes or the things on the right because we can see processes. You can make an Agile playbook. You can make an AI strategy doc. You can see it. You can look at it. It's something that shows progress, even if it's not anything meaningful. So we always default to pulling the levers that are easy and simple. And we kind of ignore the things on the left. So each of these levers have a consequence to action, right? If we pull the process lever, that's going to affect our strategy. That's going to affect structures, how they're organized. It's going to affect potential technology that we're using. Obviously with everybody rushing to do stuff with AI, that's in the technology bucket. And the next one is about the lenses that we use as a change agent. Let me flip over to one of the bigger pictures so we can actually see it a little bit better. So there. So the third one is the 5 universals, and it's kind of how we see change. Is anybody familiar with Kotter's 8 steps? So John Kotter has basically 8 steps. The first step is create urgency. So we need to create urgency in the system to get people to change. The problem becomes urgency is in the eye of the beholder. And one of the really stupid metaphors that the change world likes to use is burning platform. Has anybody heard that phrase before? And more importantly, do you know where it came from? It was literally a burning platform. It's from, I don't remember the name of the oil rig, but it was on fire, and the burning platform came from Jump or Die. And for some reason, somebody in the change world decided, hey, that's a good metaphor for creating urgency, which is kind of crazy. But it's from the perspective of a person, right? It might be urgent for the CEO to satisfy shareholders and the board. What's the urgency for a tester on a team? Probably, please leave me alone and let me get my work done. What's the urgency for a manager? It's different. So if we start to focus on a shared purpose as opposed to urgency, we're more likely to get people involved. Dialogue over broadcasting. Comms is something where, we blast information out to people and inform them about stuff. We know the documents never get read. We know the emails don't get read. But instead, what we want to do is we want to create opportunities for meaningful dialogue. That could be proper open spaces. It could be lean coffees. It could be useful town halls. I'm sure everybody's been to a town hall at one point or another. Remember back in the days before COVID where it was in person? And all the fancy people in the suits are on stage and they go, we're going to take questions now. And the questions are scripted by the comms person. So somebody walks up to the microphone and goes, yes, is there a new pragmatic way that we can approach this transformation that would help me and my team be more effective? And it's all scripted and it's done for optics. So we want to kind of not do that. And we want to encourage harder, more difficult conversations sooner. It's like if you ignore problems, you're never going to make progress. I'll go to the right side. So a lot of the times, especially early on the goal is to learn something, not necessarily to get to an outcome. But we've been trained that every problem we run into, you have to bring a solution, you have to bring the steps to execute, you have to bring the tasks and the ROI, and you have to get a tangible outcome. I'm sure people are working on an AI strategy or an AI transformation now. There is a whole pile of uncertainty that comes with that. So it might be more effective to think about, what is it? We might even need to learn what our strategy should be. So we might have to try a couple of experiments, see the feedback, see how people are using AI, share stories across departments, and then try to come up with a strategy to actually do the real change, if you want to call it that. The bottom right one, kind of self-explanatory. We're not selling used cars. And I always find it funny when change folks say, we can't get leaders to buy in. And I'm thinking, well, who's asking for the change? Like, if people aren't bought into it, what are you working on? And who are you working for? Where did the change come from? How did it come to be? If we focus on co-creation, right, there's nothing to sell. The people who write the plan don't fight the plan. So it kind of naturally shifts us into facilitator mode. And my favorite one is the bottom left. We blame resistance, but really resistance, I think, is a good thing. Apathy is a bad thing. If we have no reaction, we don't have any data to do anything. If people are really vocally opposed to the change or really upset about it, at least we have something to go on. So we kind of get curious instead of furious, and we focus on what's the response we're seeing, and then we start to pick at it. What's underneath this response? Because blaming a resistance is kind of like, I don't know what happened, but it's all y'all's fault. You might as well just say that. So this big idea gives you a way to look at change through a different set of lenses. So you can ask yourself, what would be different if I focused on trying to create purpose as opposed to scaring people with urgency? What would that look like? And how could I do that? So I'll save the 3 agilities for last because that's in the example we talked about this morning. The next one is the 2 strategies. And this is really the difference between, does anybody remember when the term Agile transformation was created? Like, it used to be called Agile adoption when I got started. So it was more like, even though we were talking about this isn't just an IT thing, it's not just about processes, back in the mid 2000s, that's what it was. It was optimizing a process. And then Agile transformation, I'm going to say probably late 2000s. Somebody correct me if you heard it kind of before that, but it became more about evolution. And that's what this two strategy idea helps with, is framing a conversation with leaders about what is it that you're trying to do. Are you just trying to optimize the parts? And we've been trained as Agilists that that's bad, right? You have to optimize the whole system. Local optimization is bad. But sometimes that's the best that the system can do right now. And it's not binary, right? This squiggly line is, suppose we start optimizing for a bit and then we hit the optimization trap. We're down to 1 hour sprints. We've optimized as much as we possibly can. Now we need to think about how do we evolve how we approach work. So we start going up the vertical line. And this is infinitely more difficult because it's like trying to change the engine of the plane while we're flying it. But it gives us number one, a frame of the conversation. So leaders, do you just want to make better processes? Or do you want to fundamentally shift how we do the work? And that might mean a reorg, and that might mean more deeper, meaningful change. And the second benefit is that it brings congruence. And what that means is we say we want transformation and we're actually behaving that way. I'm sure everybody on the meetup has a story of working on an Agile transformation where everybody was acting and behaving and talking like it was just optimization. So we need to, this Agile transformation, we're creating a new best practice standardized operating model that all teams must follow and will be measured on this checklist. I'm sure we've all seen something like that in medium and larger organizations. I like to pick on the banks in Canada because they've been doing this for 15 years now. Every year there's a new mandated standardized model that gets shoved out to the teams and they're measured against it. So just call it process optimization. Don't call it a transformation. There's nothing wrong with that because every organization is a little bit different. The 5 waves of change is a helpful tool for understanding the dynamics in the system. So it kind of piggybacks on the pattern that I showed, which is we always start off with superficial thinking. So this process is going to fix our problems. We're going to implement Agile method 1. I'm not going to use brand names because it doesn't matter. Maybe you started with Scrum, maybe you started with Kanban, maybe Safe, Less, doesn't matter. But you think the process is the thing. If we just get the process right, everything will work. And we might iterate through a few things. The pattern that I see at scale is typically, and we always had a joke here with the Agile coaches I worked with in Canada, was never be the first group of consultants in there because nothing is going to work. You're going to get the blame for everything. And then somebody else is going to come in after you and do the same things. And they're going to be the greatest people in the world because now the organization is ready for it. So never be the first coach or consultant because they don't even know what they need till they try it. And to go down the dirt road again, when we would be the second or third people in there, we would know which company was in before us. We could tell by the artifacts that they left behind, which was pretty funny. But once we get past that wave, then we go, so this process will fix it. Maybe this isn't the right process. Then eventually, if we can get to that third wave before we get eaten by the sharks, maybe it's not the process at all. So we've now elevated to a higher level of thinking based on here, the 2 strategies. So maybe we started from those processes and we optimized a bit, and then now we realized, oh, it's not the process. We actually have to evolve. So these provide a kind of a frame for that conversation. And then as we progress, we implement more meaningful change. So maybe it's not the process. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's me. I worked in one of the telecoms up here, and they had an Agile coach that was teaching a team how to use Kanban, and they were assigning the tasks, and they had a swim lane and a row for each person. and each person had to report on all the things they were doing, which is not kind of the way it works. But that was their view of the world, and it was all about the process. So as you progress through these 5 waves, your change becomes more meaningful because you're getting away from these superficial things that it's the process or it's something else. And maybe it's me as the change agent. Maybe it's the way I'm interacting with the system that's not helping it, become like Skynet and self-aware. So the one that we talked about this morning with that CIO was the 3 agilities, and this is probably not new for anybody who's been in the Agile space for a while. It, like it or not, it was always about delivery early on. How do we get the right process for the team to build stuff? And then eventually, anybody coming from the extreme programming days or worked with any extreme programming or XP teams in the late 90s, early 2000s, I'm kind of dating myself a little bit. But those technical practices kind of got lost and it became all about process. But it was really all about delivery. How do we push the teams harder to get them deliver stuff faster? And we forget about leadership agility and change agility. So it's leadership agility is how the leaders view the organization and how they view how work flows through the organization. And change agility is our ability as an organization to adapt to a rapidly changing context. And I think we see that now, especially with AI. I'm sure everyone has heard of a company that's gone under because they've been replaced by a chatbot. Like their whole value prop is gone because AI can do it faster and better. If we get really good at change, doesn't matter what the problem is. So we want to focus on not just delivery agility, but leadership agility and change agility. And the last one I'm going to mention before I show that quick example is we get on this transformation treadmill. We keep going through superficial change. We define the change, we launch the change, we implement it, we get some superficial success, we get some disillusionment, and then we reset. So now our Agile COP is no longer called an Agile COP, they're called Agile Enablement. We didn't really change anything, we just changed the name and the label. So we're still kind of stuck in this treadmill of superficial change. And again, I'm not saying any of this is good or bad, I'm just saying these are models that can help you try to explain and have a conversation about what the dynamics of the now view, what's in front of us right now, that we should focus on. So if we find that, okay, I looked at the 3 agilities, I looked at the ways of change, and it seems like we just keep adding more process when we don't see anything working. What could we do differently? So then I usually recommend the George Costanza method. I'm assuming there's at least one Seinfeld fan. Do you remember the episode where he does the opposite? Life isn't working out the way that he wants, and he goes, screw this, I'm going to do the opposite. That's the George Costanza method. So we tend to want to, we do change using our old metaphors and our old lenses, right? Well, the PMO had a standardized process for doing projects. We're just going to do that Agile now. So let's make an Agile version of that. It's kind of the same thing. So what would George Costanza do? Probably the opposite. Show teams what's possible and let them design their own way of working and help them through it instead, which will be chaotic for the PMO. But these all give you hopefully useful frames to talk about how we're going to approach change. And these last 2, how does change even happen in your organizations today? So the hole in the floor approach is, the joke is, the CIO was flying back from an AI conference, and while they were on the plane, they just typed up an email that said, oh, I saw this great tool, go buy it and implement it. That's dropping change through the hole in the floor. So a thinker decides, drops it in, and then hilarity ensues when us as the Agile coaches or the change agents have to sort that out. And that's not good or bad. That's the dynamics that we're left with, as opposed to diffusion, which is more of the organic, right? Jerry Weinberg talks about this as adding colored dye to water, right? You drop in a little bit of red dye in some water, and the spot where you dropped it is a deep red, and then it starts to dissipate a little bit. So it's more organic. You could call this top down, bottom up. I don't think it's an either or. These models are designed to help you figure out, how do we build top down support with bottom up intelligence? So not execute the change from bottom up and always have it organic, because again, if you remember the 4 dimensions, I am obviously heavily biased towards co-creation. So I'm always going to want to use diffusion and pull-based approaches to change. And sometimes that's not the right approach. Sometimes we need to push first. So depending on which is kind of the natural operating model for how change happens, that might influence how we interact with the system. So I know that was a lot to absorb in a short amount of time. Any immediate confusions or questions leap to mind? And again, this is just a small subset of these ideas. The rest are in that link that I shared. Anything stand out? Feel free to unmute or just drop it in the chat. And then I'm going to show a quick little example of what we did this morning.
I guess maybe it's tough to quantify, but how many dimensions are there to diffusion?
Diffusion is sort of the meta model, that it's spreading organically through stories or through connecting teams together who normally don't collaborate together, bringing in outside perspective from other organizations or teams that might have done the same thing. But you could definitely say it's a more we don't have an official program or a project, and we don't have firm timelines, something like that. Just at some point, somebody in the organization is upset with the status quo and they want to do something different. So they start doing it. And then somebody in the organization notices that something good came out of there. Yeah, guerrilla agile, exactly. Could be that. And then the organization either says, put a stop to that, they're not following standard procedures, or other teams go, cool, can you show us how to do that? That must be a thing too, Vicky. Is there an online reference to Guerrilla Agile? If not, go grab the domain and trademark it quickly, because that is a very cool term.
No, one of my leaders would share a story about the success he had doing that in an organization.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, these are kind of just bucketed into categories to sort of point you to, what do I want to look at? Because it can be overwhelming to look at all these ones, especially this one here. I mean, it looks awesome, but you're like, what the heck is this and how do I use it? This is really about how to try to understand how to interact with the organization. And if the organization values standards, so every team must follow a standard operating process, that means they're fueled by stability. They don't want uncertainty. They don't want surprises. But the adverse effect is obedience or rope-a-dope, right? Well, you told me to do 2-week sprints, so we did. That naturally builds more control, which leads to more conformist beliefs and attitudes, and leaders are acting in an egocentric way. And what we try to do is, if the organization is, ooh, that's a big ass sticky note. If the organization is right in the middle, say they're, a control organization, when we come in and they say, hey, we want to transform to Agile or something, my brain goes to, oh, you want to be an adaptable organization. And it's this difference that is the confusion. Neither of us are right or wrong. It's just my lens and my way of thinking is not congruent to, stop it, Miro. Not congruent to where the organization is right now. And this organizational gravity in the middle is the thing that is keeping the organization in that orbit, right? We've always been successful by getting and maintaining control, always. And the way we do it is with standards. So we're going to have to just, hire Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck to kind of nudge that comet out of orbit, out of orbit. Another old movie reference. So maybe instead of standards, we focus on goals. Okay. So if we're going to focus on goals, then we're going to be fueled by ambition. That might create competition and excellence, which builds more competence, which builds an achievement culture. But then leaders might feel we're being reactive, and then gravity sucks them back in the middle. So it's kind of like you want to create enough escape velocity over time to get to where you want to go. So you can kind of use this as a map. And yes, it's influenced by Bob Anderson's leadership work, Frederick Laloux's work, William Schneider, for people who might have read the re-engineering alternative. It's sort of like mashed, those things are all mashed together to create this vortex of behavior. So I'm going to now try a quick experiment, because I literally just decided, hey, what would happen if I built something that would help people figure out which one to start with? So this is what we did with the example from this morning, is we started from, what's the challenge you're experiencing? People are resisting change, which it's kind of more about nobody is engaging because they're all confused. Okay, cool. What's next? So we need to adopt these practices. Here's some more context about what's happening. Here's some information about the system dynamics that are happening in the organization. And then some more metadata. So what is it that I'm seeing that shows me that people are being resistant? Who's being the most vocal? And what might they be protecting? What might these people lose? And then the system takes the 200 and some odd elements and ideas and says, here's what I think might be the most useful. So maybe you want to look at the 5 universals. Here's why. Maybe you want to look at the 3 agilities, and here's why. So now we flip back to the board here, and we start doing some activities around maybe the 3 agilities. So we start thinking, okay, maybe the problem is we're focused just on delivery agility. So if we wanted to help our leaders adopt more of an agility mindset towards this transformation or whatever it is, what would that look like? And then we brainstorm some ideas. So now we're going from what our view and perception of the system is, validating it with the people who are in the system, and now we want to try to get to action. So when we try to get to action, we can pick the stories we tell ourselves. So our current state is, yeah, the legacy of past changes is really hurting us, because people are saying things like, well, we did an agile transformation last year, it didn't work. Or we did that and it didn't work. Okay. So these might be the anti-patterns. We're focused on process over people. We're creating documents to prove value. These are not pre-coded. These are based on the data that you've given this tool. So it's trying to determine what the patterns might be, which of the big ideas might be the most useful for you to look at to help you make sense of that situation. And then where do you want to be in the future? Well, we want to start co-creating. We want to start creating momentum. All right, cool. Then you design your experiment. So what do you want to do? And in the case of the person this morning, they said, well, this is really what we want to do. We want to get the team leads together, because we've just been telling them and sending them documents about how to do it, but we actually want to do a co-created session. And I think if we did that, we'd get this benefit. And here's some measurements that I think might work. Great. So we save it. This gives us a summary. And then this part doesn't work yet, so I'm going to do this in the manual way. I'm going to copy this and switch to my other window. And this is now being sent to my little AI agent that's going to take all that information It's trained on all the 6 big ideas. And it is going to, once I hit the magic button that you can't see because I'm in my other window, it's going to give me a response. So I'm going to take that response, and now I'm going to paste that in here because this tool isn't finished yet. So given the information that you put in and the sense making that you did with those models, it's going to say, all right, well, here's the goal, here's the outcomes, here's some other information, and this is what you could try. So here's your option. You could try doing this. Here's another option. You could potentially try this. And then some more information and some potential next actions that you can do. So it's very early in development, but it's not designed to say, you know, this is what you should do because I said so. It's driven from the conversation that you have with the sense-making models here. So you would take your output from whichever of these models that kind of helps you understand, like I mentioned, what's right in front of you right now. Where do we want to be at the end of the week? And all this is doing is helping you synthesize an experiment. So now you go away and you try it, and you come back and you say, this is what I tried. This is what happened. What could I do next? Rinse and repeat on a weekly basis. And that's the fastest version of going through all of these ideas. So they all have a different purpose, but the magic is with you, the change agent. Like, you know the environment, you know what the change is, you understand the context more than any framework diagram or tool or method. So try to pick the ones that make the most sense and try to explain the dynamics that you see, and then the tool will kind of spit out, here's what I heard and here's what I think, but you are the human that still decides. And the title sense making is the new change management is to get away from when we're stuck with a change. In traditional circles, we want to throw all that stuff away and start over. We need a better plan. We need better documentation. We need a better SharePoint site. We need a better comms plan. These superficial things that are easy to do and show something is happening, because you can show a comms plan. Even if it doesn't work, you can still show it. We really want to get to something that's more deeper and more meaningful. And the more we can repeat that process with small, consistent actions week to week, the more likely we're to learn what the right change is in the first place, what's really going on in the organization, and what we can do about it. So we do have some time for comments and questions, or a real demo, if anybody has a real problem they want to try, because the real part of the demo works too. But anything top of mind for anybody? Question that's popping out, something that you might have found useful or confusing?
I think your tool helps give some structure to someone who's doing this from scratch. Jason's, it's amazing how he does that, because you can go in, look at each one of these objectively, or take a systems view of what you're trying to solve, and then the tool makes it so much more simpler for you to then structure that approach, if I may call it that, to something. So I like it. Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate that. And Vicky, yes, it will be released soon. There's a version on our member portal right now, an experimenter tool, that's not really driven by AI yet. It just gives you one piece of feedback, but this will be a conversation bot. So as you add the problems in there, you can have conversations with it, and it's trained on all of the stuff. And obviously it's biased towards lean change, which I tell people all the time, never, which is kind of stupid to say, never buy an AI tool from a change vendor because it's coming with baggage, right? Like if you buy ProSize, whatever, gee, what do you think it's going to recommend? It's going to recommend a gigantic framework and document, whereas mine's going to recommend the opposite. So take some of that with a grain of salt. Right. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, confusions?
I like this tangible approach because so much of what a lot of us do seems touchy-feely and can be hard to quantify. So thanks for your work on that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, any other questions for Jason? Comments? So, Jason, just wrapping up, where can we find you, contact information, stuff like that?
Leanchange.org is the best place to go. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Okay,
Should be
excellent.
pretty easy to find there.
For sure. Well, yeah, thank you for your presentation today. Really appreciate it. And yeah, looks like got some really great comments in the chat. Please give him a virtual round of applause. Again, great stuff. We'll have the recording up at some point in the not too distant future on our YouTube channel, and we'll share that out with the meetup group as well as our social media. So thanks again, Jason. Appreciate it. Everybody else have a happy rest of your Friday, and we'll see you on the next go round.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
See you.
All right.